Yo, yo,
everyone.
yo.
Yes, I see
Yo,
some
yo, yo.
happy Thursday greetings in the chat here. So, happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome to the Great Transition. If you're new here, this is the place to be if you feel that the world is going through an unprecedented change in our time and you want to kind of put the pieces together, see the bigger picture, make sense of it all, and see how we can all, as human beings, find a common process that we're going through beyond all the differences or phone calls of beyond our differences of culture and political differences and religion and whatnot. That's what we're doing here in the Great Transition. We are looking at the natural process that humanity is going through the prism of authentic Kabbalah, and we're using that as a foundation to understand where the world is going, where it's headed, where we are. So today we're going to talk about time and space, aren't we? Is that what's going to happen, man?
We are going to open up time and space. I've been waiting to do this with you for a long time.
Right.
Perception of reality. I think there's a feeling that reality is how it is, and then if we recycled more, or if we came up with electric powered cars, or if we had robots to do some of the labor,
Hmm.
or if we just all moved to Costa Rica and just chilled out a little bit, then everything would be better. And basically just take you were in a sandbox. We have the whatever building materials we have available, and instead of building, okay, for example, even an easier one, you have a house and the sun rises, the north side is colder, right? So put the windows on the south side so the sun can get in the house, and then it's warmer, instead of putting all the windows on the north, and every time the wind blows it gets cold in the house. It's just, there's this kind of thought that to make a better world, we just take the same building blocks but just arrange them a little bit better. If everybody would just stop being such an idiot and we could just, arrange them a little better, everything would be better. But really, what we're talking about in this great transition is this process of emergence, meaning when the hydrogen and the oxygen comes together, it's not just, oh, before the hydrogen was over here, now the it was over there, and we just switch them, but that something new, we tune in somehow, there's a reality that's here that we're not perceiving, and that somehow through this process of going through this great transition, perceiving time and space, well, we're going to open up what it means, how we're perceiving time and space now, what it means in terms of this whole process. So it's very exciting because um, it's really not something we can speak about, because how can you speak about a prepubescent kid about life after puberty? It's like it's we need some other kind of perception vessel, another sense, a sixth sense or something to perceive beyond beyond that. The Kabbalist Rambam from about 1,000 years ago, Spain, 1100, 1200, something like that.
Yeah.
Huge Kabbalist. He said that this whole world exists below the speed of light. Remember my
Right.
song, Things That Come From the Heart? A world exists below the speed of light. My friends stay up and
Oh, yeah,
study
yeah,
all
yeah.
night. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll have to do that one sometime. So Einstein also said this world exists below the speed of light, but this is something that was, at least 1,000 years ago. We have the same thing in a Kabbalistic book. This comes from um, not studying external phenomenon, but from tuning into uh, the reality that's out there. And by understanding that, we start to understand where our solution is. I think that's one of the main things when we come to this wisdom. One of the things that takes the longest amount of time, and I see it all the time with new students coming in, is actually understanding where the target is, because you're just constantly, okay, all right, so all my blocks in the sandbox were wrong. Instead of hating people, now I have to love people, or instead of doing this, now I have to do like that, or but not understanding still where is the target. I think that's what takes a long time to figure out exactly what I'm aiming at. Once you figure out what you're aiming at, nature's doing the majority of the work anyway. I mean, you didn't, oh, let's put the eyes over here when you make a kid. It's like, oh, let's put the eyes here. Maybe we'll move the nose. No, nature does all of the hard stuff in making a baby, right? You
Yeah.
just need to find the
The,
person,
tell that to my
arrange a
wife.
date. No, no, you know what I'm saying. You need to, maybe it'd be better if the ears were over here or something. No, you need
Yeah.
to find the person and make a baby, but nature does all the hard work, all the arranging and developing and trial and error through the years in order to put all the parts in the right place and all that. So the process of I feel like you have no idea what I'm talking about.
I am very I'm very interested in what you're saying, mostly in how does it relate to time and space is what I'm
Okay,
asking
well, well,
myself.
well, go with me. All right, I'll try again. How about this? So I'm older than you, but when we had a TV in my house growing up, there was like two knobs. One I think said UHF, VHF, or something like that, and the one below it you turned, and there was maybe like 10 channels. I don't know how many it was, but it
Right.
was like a knob, literally. Small TV, weighed 1,000 pounds. It was like that big in the corner of the room, and on top of it were these two metal wires, antenna wires. And so when you
Yeah.
wanted to watch a channel, you literally had to move the antennas. Oh, okay, got it. Okay, move the other one.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it. So basically the TV station was in the air,
Hmm.
okay? And you're just kind of tuning this thing to be able to perceive what's already in the air. Okay? With me so far?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay. So just look for your launch pad. I'm going to keep trying to make a runway, and you just look for where you can take off on this runway. Okay. So in the similar way, we exist in an endless field of light now. Okay. We are existing in an endless field of light. We are like that TV in a sense. We are tuned in to the light, and each of us is tuning into it. Each of us is like a unique TV that's tuning into the light, um, and getting a certain picture. Basically, what happens is matter, reality dresses on the light. So there's endless white light, and the way that we perceive reality is that matter is dressing onto that light. It's dressing onto it through 4 degrees. We keep hinting at these 4 degrees. One show will really open up what that all is. So you take two different people in different parts of the world, and they perceive the same white light, but through depending on how their instrument is calibrated, they perceive reality in a certain way. Some people feel that an hour is taking forever. Some people feel that an hour is going very fast. A Kabbalist is living in this world, but he's also so tuned in to the frequency that he's not stopping just at the material levels. He's also perceiving what's behind that. So you we good so far? Am I clear?
Yeah, no, I mean you're the TV example is about how um we perceive, um we are perceivers of reality, and everything that we think of as real, potentially including time and space, is a construct of our perception. That essentially is what I
Mhm.
get from your example. Is that where you
Right.
were going?
Yeah, I wanted to lay um, the first building blocks, the first foundations of this perception, right? Just so we understand how we are and how we're perceiving time, because, um, yeah, that's what was
Right.
going
So
on there.
our sense of time is malleable. There's no doubt that this is so. This is, the easiest thing, the easiest way to explain that is, every child notices that when you're having fun, time flies, and when you're suffering, time almost stands still. But it's not just that our experience of time is different, and there's a lot of psychology experiments where people are in different situations, and you ask them what's the time before and what's the time after, and you see that according to
Mm-hmm.
the different adventures you put them through, they experience time as being, longer or shorter and so on. But beyond that kind of psychological measurement, there's also differences and malleability in the physical measurement of time, which I find really interesting. This is I think you mentioned Einstein at some point there. You said Einstein something. Anyway, it was Einstein who came with the theory of relativity and the convergence of space and time into space time. And only later, after his theories, like later on, they were able to measure and do some experiments and actually see that, for instance, if you put a clock on, that on a plane that travels the world versus a clock that measures time on the ground, there are differences. Now, these are differences of, a few billionths of a billionth of a second, but there are still
Mm-hmm.
differences in how the clock measures time, whether it's standing still on the ground or it is flying around the world. So, movement, velocity, speed also changes the physical measurement of time. It's not just our psychology that tells us this was more or less time. The time
Right.
itself is no longer
There's
anything fixed. Yeah, go ahead.
there's stars that absorb radiation instead of emitting, and there's like talk in the scientific community that there's actually areas where time stops and areas where time flows backwards.
Mm.
So yeah, there's our perception, and then okay, so you're bringing another piece here that time itself is this malleable thing, the
Time
nature of
itself,
it.
yeah, and the faster, what Einstein showed was basically the faster you move, the slower time passes. And you could look at time, because time is inseparable from space. um, so just like we think of space as something that always exists, right? So space is out there, meaning you think about all the
It's the
universe.
backdrop of.
It's out there. It just, maybe you're there or you're not. Right now you're on planet Earth. Maybe tomorrow you'll be on Mars, and maybe the day after you'll be in Pluto, or whatever. But the
Mhm.
space, we think of it as there, always there, all of it. So what Einstein is essentially saying is that basically we should look at time in the same way. All of time is always there at
Nice.
all times. So essentially, I think, Chris, can you bring up there's an Einstein quote where he says that about the distinction between past and present and future, that it's an imagination, something of that, something along those lines. Um, yeah, there we go. So the distinction between the past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. Yeah, so you can look at time as something that we experience it as something that passes, and we can only go forward. We can't go backwards. We can look at backwards, but we can't see forward. We have a limited perception of time, but time in itself is not necessarily something that passes. It's something that is potentially always there, but in what kind of reality, in what kind of perception, in what kind of experience do we experience time in that manner? But certainly, I think the first point, and we'll bring in some. The deeper we go, we can maybe go deeper into what Kabbalah has to say about it. But the I think the first kind of building block in understanding time and space, which are like an inseparable concept, really, is that to understand that there is something that we call time. We need to understand what that is. And then there's our experience of time, both time and space. If you want to be accurate, you have to say, if you want to be empirical, if you want to be truthful, you have to say that they are constructs that we experience. They are patterns of human thinking, and not necessarily that they exist outside of us. There we go. Here's another Einstein. Yeah, time and space are modes by which we think, and not conditions in which we live. Nice. Yeah, exactly. So
So it's
anyway,
it's
yeah.
awesome that modern science, I'm including Einstein in all that, develops like this because it's really difficult for a caveman or primitive man to come to the spiritual realization. It's a totally different experience when we're in such a unique
Hmm.
time. We're in such a unique time where even in
Yeah.
science,
Yeah.
although it's very interesting, the scientists won't be able to actually break this barrier because they don't have they'll start to understand what system they're in, they'll start to understand what the limitation is, but without the spiritual perception they're still within the, what's that kind of expression, you can't jump onto the table until you jump above the table kind of thing, like you need to be able to um
Yeah, you can't.
well, you need to,
Einstein himself. Again, we're too Einstein infused today. But there's another there's another famous Einstein statement where he says that basically you can't understand your own level of thinking unless you rise to a higher level of thinking. You can't understand problems on a certain level without rising to a higher level. You can't without understanding the level of thinking that created the problem. So this is he's relating to scientific
so
exploration and
so
scientific investigation, but that's essentially how our mind works. Yeah, go ahead.
the wonderful thing about modern science now, if we're really using the scientific method and not being biased because of politics or money interests,
Hmm.
but the discoveries of science, is
Which
that we
is rare,
find
by the
out,
way. Which is rare. Yeah, but that's a tangent. Let's
what'd you
not get
say?
into. I said which is rare, by the way.
Super rare.
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
that
Because
science
the
is actually
findings are always
pure.
based on whoever's
Yeah,
funding the
and
science.
also
So,
coming from a few years in the academic world, there's so much, not just politics, but dogma in science, which is supposed to be the exploration of truth. And there's so much dogma and things that are researched or not researched based on all kinds of interest and
mhm.
lack of willingness to explore certain things, even though you should be exploring anything if you're about truth, right? But it's humans, and humans are influenced by interests and politics and power and honor and money and all kinds of things, and that's why science is very much influenced by that. But anyway, that's a different story.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's all super true, which makes this more difficult. But the real scientific discoveries are showing this, showing that all of these things that accept what's beyond it, except the why. We talked about this before, that science is good at figuring out like the what, but not the why.
Yes,
Um,
the what
but
and the how, I would say, but not the why. Yeah.
the what and the how, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and so it's very, very um, relevant for us because then we can use all of these, if we can rely on all of these diagrams and all of the things that they show us to actually understand our reality, because we're not relying on any kind of mysticism here. That's,
Mm-hmm.
again, like you could say it's mystical how a baby is born, how from like a drop of seed, like, does an Einstein happen, does a person like
Mm-hmm.
that come, like what did you do, what did, like everybody's trying, how does a person form? There's a magic, you could say, in innate, that's not a magic, it's just natural forces that are in there. There's another force besides the mother and besides the father. Those two do a great job, but then nature does its part, and you have a life.
Hmm.
So it's not just taking a bunch of proteins and DNA and
Right.
mixing them up. There's some other force in there that happens, and um, through looking at, through studying all of these, what the scientists are able to show us, we can really understand the world we're living in. some fundamental things that I don't think they that they I haven't seen it so much, but the wisdom of Kabbalah, the primary matter of all of creation is a will to receive pleasure, like a will to receive fulfillment on everything that exists on some level, inanimate, vegetative, animate, or speaking. We're trying to draw to itself some pleasure. So we're perceived. Now, you brought up something interesting, which is time exists by itself. I'm approaching it from a little bit of a different angle, and we'll see how we braid these things together. But the pleasures that I can receive, that I'm yet to receive, that's how we measure the future.
Mm-hmm.
Looking back on what we did receive, how we received it, that's how we perceive the past. So if there is no opportunity to ever receive any fulfillment, so then there's no movement of time. Then it's almost until you come to the point of death. So when the more that science, sober, authentic science really starts to understand the nature of the reality and starts to paint it to us, everyone, people will be able to come to these sublime degrees more and more easily, because we'll start to understand what is the system we're in, how is it operating. Of course, they need to have the why on top of it and able to be able to use it. Okay, so fine. So we did all, we had the collider. What's the
The
collider
Large
called?
Hadron Collider.
Yeah, you got
What
you
about
got that, you
what
got
about
all
that?
Einstein science,
Ah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
you have all of this science. Um, so what are we going to turn it into some Silicon Valley tech company out of it? Or how is it going to help us? How is it going to bring peace on earth? How is it going to fulfill all of humankind? So it's not just the discovery, it's also understanding the story behind it. Who are we? What are we doing here?
Right.
What's the purpose of these discoveries?
Understanding the story. That's actually that's profound because the we can when thinking about time and space, especially time, um, we need to think about it more like a story. The again, if all of time, all of the instances of time, all the moments of past, present, and future, if they are already there, then life is more like watching a movie rather than going through some unknown random events, but we're more like just experiencing a frame and then another frame and then another frame, just because we're not the director, we're not
So
in the
I'm
director's
standing in
seat.
place, and
Mhm.
reality is dressing on the light in front of me constantly. It's like I'm
Yeah,
some point in.
you know what, I think we gotta put some some foundations here, because we're maybe
Please
talking
put.
in a language that not necessarily understood by all our viewers, depending on how long they're listening, and how familiar they are with the wisdom of Kabbalah. Anyway, um, so okay, so I think going back to science and what we learned from Einstein about how time is like a stubborn illusion that we are in. It's just a very persistent kind of illusion. There's also an understanding in science that time has a beginning. It is Most scientists today, most physicists agree that time started about 14 billion years ago. Time has a beginning. They don't know
Big
if it
Bang.
has an end. They don't know if it has an end or not. Spoiler, should I do a spoiler? A Kabbalah
Not yet,
spoiler?
not yet, not
Okay,
yet. But just build up to it.
Kabbalah spoiler, time does have an end. We'll get there, but just a quick spoiler.
Okay.
Okay,
By the way, I
now
voted to not give the answer away so quick, but all right.
really? I thought you were in
I
favor.
like the
Okay.
build up.
No, but wait, it's still a question. It's still a mystery. What does it mean that time has an end, and how does that work out? We'll pay it off, I hope. But But time has a beginning, science says, and that beginning is almost 14 billion years ago. What happened before time? That's already a contradiction in terms, isn't it? Before time. But what preceded time? Let's try to be more accurate than with our language. What caused, what is the causality that created this time that apparently we experience as an illusion of the passing of time that we cannot, that we experience, can't stop, can't go backwards, can't look forwards? What created that experience of time and space, for that matter? What created it? And so this is where Kabbalah steps in and can actually provide us with answers, um, and science just can't, because that depends on an attainment of the reality that precedes matter, the reality that precedes the Big Bang, the reality that is the causal level, the informative, non material level of reality that gives rise to everything that we see and hear and can feel and touch through our five senses in this physical reality. In other words, we have to understand what happens uh, uh, before, what happens as a cause that preceded the Big Bang. And so I'm if I'm gonna go
You're
there,
good.
I'm gonna try to be brief here, because you know it's not a full on Kabbalah course here, but but if it gets too much, then just stop me and whatever, take it in whatever direction it should go. So before the Big Bang, we, all of us, and all of reality, you and me and everyone in the chat right now and everyone in the world, and all of the world, and all of the still vegetative and animate, all of the billions and billions of planets that exist, this whole universe was one thing. Now, again, this is something that even if you go to the origins of the universe, the Big Bang, you go to the physicists' explanation, they'll tell you that all this universe started from one point that was a tiny little point that then expanded and exploded. They call it the inflationary expansion. That's essentially the explosion that happened in the Big Bang, from which the universe began to expand. But even before that point is already a material physical explosion. Before that material explosion even happens, there is a non material, spiritual entity, an essence of all of reality, all of creation, that is all one. And in that state, when there is oneness, there is no time and space. I think I saw earlier someone on the chat said, where was it? Isn't experience itself a function of time? Um, um, I would rephrase the question and ask, what is time as an experience? What is it a function of? And time is a function of separation. So back to that state before the Big Bang, reality is this one singularity. Kabbalists call this state one, unique, and unified. That's the definition, and it's not a poetic definition, it's a very technical definition. It means that the quality that is felt, that exists, that is dominant in that state is the quality, is one quality, a single quality. It's the quality of pure, unconditional bestowal that is beyond self-interest, so it's something we can't understand. We can call it unconditional love, unconditional bestowal, but we don't understand truly what it is. It is the giving force that governs everything else that we see in our reality, in nature. It's the governing program behind, that gives life and sustains and guides all of nature, all of reality. So before the reality of this world, before the Big Bang, there's only this one quality of bestowal that dominates everything. And it is unifying all of creation as one. And there is nothing, it is singular, it is unique, there is nothing else. So that state of oneness is a state that has to be beyond time and space, because there is nowhere to get to. There is nothing that needs to happen. Again, Kabbalists call this, another term for it, a state of complete rest. This is the state that creation is in the beginning, before the Big Bang. In the very beginning, there is a created being, but it is in complete adhesion and connection and bonding with that governing force of reality. And so, in that state, there's no time and space. But what happens over a process that we will skip entirely because we really don't have the, this will take a lot to get into. But what happens then is a process that the climax of it, or the peak of it,
The
is
opposite,
what?
the bottommost climax.
Yeah, yeah, maybe to put it like that. It's hard. It depends on where you look at it, but yeah, the a process that reaches um, something Kabbalists call the shattering. So the shattering is a situation where that creation that was one, unique and unified, where all the pieces are one, where creation is one with the force that created it, where everything is beyond time and space, and there is no separation. That creation is now being shattered. What does that mean? That means that instead of one, there are many. Instead of complete rest, now there is movement. Instead of a situation of complete connection and bonding between the governing force of nature and the force of creation, the created being, now there's separation between them. And so that still happens um, on a spiritual level. And in spirituality, again, there's no time, no physical movement, no physical space. There's only qualities, frequencies that of varying degrees of bestowal. And when the created being begins to be separated from that frequency of bestowal, it gains independent on the one hand. It becomes aware of itself on the one hand, but on the other hand, it becomes removed from that reality of oneness. It becomes removed from, distant from that reality where there's no space and time. And that process continues until it reaches the very last spiritual degree
Seth, let me
of,
chime in for
yeah,
for a moment before you give the end there.
yeah, the
There,
you should have stopped me earlier probably.
there's that was beautiful. There's I just want to touch on why this whole process happened. Like, why did there need to be a shattering? Why did so prior everything is, if you're a piece of that light or something, there's no conscious awareness, so to speak, right? Even when you were born, when you were 1 year old, you didn't even know who your mom was. You didn't know anything. um, so imagine perceiving that oneness. I mean, it's hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine, we cry from a beautiful piece of music or a beautiful movie. I mean, could you imagine feeling the unification of all of reality? You would need another, cup. You need something to hold that. Otherwise it's just too much. Before, so the process that happened before material reality is this whole kind of sorting out of, okay, so everything is just one, complete, one, unique and unified. What does it mean one? What does it mean unique? What does it mean unified? These are different aspects, but what is that? Until we need to have some kind of creature that can actually enjoy all of this, because we're endlessly everything in all directions forever. There's no, in that there's no if I just pour sugar down your throat, from the beginning till the end, there's no flavor, there's no sweetness anymore. It's just it's gone. If you're cold and you just go in front of hot water and then you just sit there for 10 years, it's not an enjoyable warm experience. All of the
Right.
things that we experience come from the combination of these different sensations. So the
Yeah, from
whole process,
contrast.
so
Yeah.
mhm,
From contrast.
from
Yeah.
contrast, so endlessly bestowing love and light, which filled reality before creation. Creation itself is the contrast of the light. And by that creation is how we can come to perceive that light. And the purpose of that shattering is only in order that the creature can feel, can perceive that light.
Yes, that's a critical addition. The reason, the whole purpose for the shattering and the separation of the created being from that state of oneness, why do that? Is in order for the created being to develop its own desire, its own independence, its own consciousness, so that it can actually consciously experience the oneness that it is in. But in the meantime, what we have is this shattering, this separation. And so the ultimate state, or the how do you say, the lowest, like the most at the bottom, is there a word for that?
The
The
opposite
lowest, but
of
like
I
the
think
most
Chaim
bottom.
uses it in a certain word. Hold on. I think,
There's a good word for it. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
yeah, yeah.
The lowest state, the of that shattering, of that separation, is where there's complete detachment from the reality of oneness. That is the reality of our world. When so imagine the this is beyond time and space, right? So we're only talking about difference of qualities. Kabbalists call this disparity of form. That's what we're talking about, but I'll do it like this with my hands just to make it kind of easier to grasp. So if the created being was at first like completely bonded with that force of one, with that oneness, with the quality of bestowal, it has now became separated, and then more and more and more remote. Again, this is not in physical space, this is a difference of qualities. And at some point it reaches like 100% oppositeness. When that happens, the result of that is the explosion that we identify with our ordinary science as the origin of our universe. That is the point at which our universe, matter, the physical world, our physics, that's where it begins. And so what happens is that
Can you?
we,
This is just.
yeah.
This is like gives me the chills. Can you just rewind and do that one more time? So we are just talking about complete love, light, total bestowal, right? Until it descends and descends and descends and gets to the point that this physical world is going to be created. Can you just go over
So
what
we
happens there
were
again?
all, yeah, you did it better. So I'll I don't know what else can I add, but we were all of us, all people and animals and plants and planets, everything in the universe was one. And this one creation, this one created being was unconsciously glued to the complete quality of bestowal that created it, a quality that gives life, a quality that its whole um, being, it only has one vector, and that's giving, pure giving, warmth, love, bestowal, however you call it. It is a
This, by the way,
spiritual quality.
so Melissa
Yeah.
Holden asked before exactly what exploded. So when you give this answer this time, you know,
What is it that exploded?
and say what you did. Yeah.
That's a very technical, we'll have to get very technical here, because The created being goes through 125 degrees of separation between the first state of unconscious adhesion with that initial thought of creation, that initial governing force connection with it, to complete disconnection with it. And then but the light, that's what you called it, the light, or the quality of bestowal, and the quality of the created being, which is the opposite quality of reception, those qualities, they're always intertwined as the created being goes down 125 degrees. The entrance of the most reduced spark of bestowal, of the quality of bestowal, when it permeates the substance, the spiritual substance called the will to receive, that exactly is the Big Bang. That entrance of the spark of light that enters the lowest layer of the will to receive, that is what initiates this explosion that creates the experience of matter. But I don't know how clear that will be without explaining
Very
the
clear. No,
the
no,
entire
this was
process.
nice. So
The
basically, when it turns the separation between with this formation of this will to receive, opposite and detached from the that other force, that is the beginning of the physical reality of
Yeah,
all
maybe we
physical.
should. Yeah, we should say that, from a Kabbalistic perspective, everything that exists, everything and anything in reality, is at, is really at the core, at the causal level, is only made up of two forces: the giving force and the receiving force. Light and Kli, as we call it in Kabbalah, the quality of bestowal and the quality of reception. Sometimes we call it the intention to bestow and the intention to receive, the creator and the created being. And these two qualities, they continuously interact, and this interplay between them creates all of the spiritual degrees, from the beginning, the initial state of creation, all the way down to that Big Bang, and also everything that happens with our material evolution, the creation of atoms, and then their connection and integration into molecules and other compounds, and organisms and superorganisms and plants and animals and people and conscious human beings that evolve, and so on. All of that is just the light and the Kli, the quality of reception, the quality of bestowal, constantly creating the next level of life between them. Time.
Funk the
Let's
doc.
go back to time. What?
Okay, okay. I wanted to ask, do one more question. Funk, you want to wait?
Whatever you think.
Okay, maybe it'll help before you get back to time.
Mm-hmm.
So Funk the Doc says, isn't the sixth sense just hallucinating? So that's what's very special about this method. And what science is helping open a little bit is Asaf described that descent of those 125 degrees that's observed, that's attained by the Kabbalists, by the scientists who reached those things and then wrote about those things. The sixth sense, what we mentioned before, in order um, to feel the why and to feel the how, it's not hallucinating. It's specifically attainment. That's what this whole method is about. It's about specifically reaching these things. Um, and maybe we'll get it. I don't know if we'll have a chance today to uh, really get into how that happens, but yeah, it's not this perception of beyond time space. It's not about putting a hit of acid on your tongue, or eating some mushrooms, or licking a frog, or I don't know, doing breathing exercises until um, you perceive beyond the boundaries of your skin, so to speak. But this is about a method of reaching that attainment, and it is literally a sense. The same way that an eye is a sense, the other five senses are senses. It's also a sense. Now, how to form each sense has a special membrane, a retina, an eardrum, or whatever it is that that we perceive something. So, what is that mechanism? What is that masach, that screen, that membrane that we feel that upper light? Um, I'm not sure we'll have time in this story to get to it, but so back to our story.
So time,
Time.
right? We wanted so that takes us exactly to understanding how time was created. So we already understand, a lot of scientists, including Einstein, thought that, and it's becoming clearer and clearer to us that time here is an illusion. The way we experience time and even space is is not what it really is. And so here is what's happening, through a Kabbalistic lens, right? So as the creation, this one creation became shattered, separated into many different pieces. I'm not going to go into the mechanics of this process, obviously, now, but there's a very detailed description of how it happens, what pieces to what pieces that substance of creation is broken, and what kind of divisions and how they are shattered. What is the process step by step? This is an incredible body of spiritual knowledge that came to us, mostly from the Ari about 450 years ago, something like that. And then from Bala Sulam, who interpreted the Ari less than 100 years ago. So this is also, and Kabbalah is a science that starts from, about 5,780 years ago, if you want to be,
The
ex-
Ari, he
so
came kind of from the end of the process, and he gave us this the language called sphirot and worlds and all of that stuff. Before that, we had this thing from the Abraham and the ancient
yeah,
guys,
but
but it was a
there was no mechanical,
right,
technical, accurate account of all the things that the previous
the
Kabbalists
membrane
were.
specifically that we talked to the Masach and all
Yeah.
the like returning
S-
light and
So why am I saying that? Just to say that as we're discussing this, because some people may think that we are, hallucinating, as I hear. So, I just want to stress that, Kabbalah, just like the development of other forms of science, it's been evolving, except that our, ordinary science started, what, 1,000 years ago, depending on where you start, and Kabbalah started almost 6,000 years ago. So it just has more time, and so the stuff that we know today from Kabbalists, um, and we can talk about, is fairly recent and new, and it didn't exist a couple hundred years ago. So it wasn't as detailed, it wasn't as clarified. It's just like how, Einstein discovers something, but only later on other scientists are able to then go deeper into the detail, and through more specific experimentation with better tools, they can now be able to detail the equations more, or something like that. So a similar thing happens with the evolution of the wisdom of Kabbalah throughout the centuries. The 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 sense of time and space that we have in this world is specifically because of that shattering, the separation between us, all pieces of reality. All of creation is one thing. We are part of that one thing. We are in a process from the beginning of creation, the beginning of the Big Bang. We are in a process, right? This is where time begins. Scientists agree with this too. Time begins about 14 billion years ago. What actually starts, we don't understand it without the wisdom of Kabbalah. What actually starts 14 billion years ago is a process of the whole of creation going back to a state of oneness. That's the
returning,
weird thing. Yeah, going back, turning back. Yeah, that's
returning.
the returning. Yes, exactly. That is what's so, weird to get your head around, because it seems to us that the Big Bang is an explosion. Everything is expanding. You have the second law of thermodynamics. Entropy is always increasing, right? Disorder, chaos. On the other hand, look at biological systems, and what you see is order. You see limitations and directions over the atoms and molecules that direct them into and regulate their organization, so they can build new and more complex organisms and new and more complex levels of life. So that's not so much entropy, is it? It's more order and more
We
organization
can
and more
find
complexity. Go ahead, yeah.
we can find a great example here of the difference between the regular earthly scientist and the Kabbalist. So Darwin said, okay, everything started at a point, and it's developing through survival of the fittest and different things, and it's surviving in a certain direction. Comes the Kabbalist and says, he points to the end of the show, and he says that
Mm-hmm.
everything is developing to reach this end. It's not starting here in order, and just moving through time this way. Kabbalist says, here's already where it's heading, and now I'm going to explain how it got there and how it reaches there.
Right.
It's like
So
looking at something from two different perspectives.
So, as long as we're in this process of the material universe, gradually the creation that is separated, gradually returning to oneness, creating more and more complex connections, and becoming gradually consciously connected as one again, until that happens, we feel that we are separated from that state. That sense of separation puts us in a constant lack, in a constant deficit. And while we don't know exactly what that sensation is, and it's hard for us to put the finger on it, what we experience is the passing of time, because we are uh, distant from our state of oneness, which means also distant from the fulfillment that we crave, from that sense of connection and eternal bliss that we long for. And so we're separated from it, and that separation is something that we feel as the sense of time. And then there's also these disparities of form between us, these spiritual differences and um, conflicts between us. This shattering, to use the Kabbalistic term, this shattering between us gives us a sense of everything is separated. There are many. It's not one creation, there's many different things. That is what creates the construct of space in the material experience of our world. And so there's a great quote, Chris, can you pull up that Rav Kook quote? um, or maybe actually, you know what, we have a little bit of time. There's a Bala Salam quote as well, that I sent you earlier about time. Let's start from that one. We gotta read this. This is really good. This is really good. The You got it? Okay, time and space. This is Einstein. Okay, we can go back to Einstein for a second. Actually, time and space are modes by which we think, not conditions in which we live. Go to the Bala Salam quote. Not We can read this one too. The Okay, here's the one. We'll read this one. Time, in its spiritual definition, is but a sense of changes, right? So there's cause and effect. There are changes that are always happening. Um, but we feel them as the passing of time. The human mind projects a number of successive changes as an imagined amount of time. Go for go yeah. If one were at complete rest with his environment, which is that initial state of creation, We are at complete rest there in that point of singularity, one unique and unified, one creation connected with the force that created it. At that point, one would not know about the concept of time at all. And then go to another one. There's another one I think we put there. The next one? No, that's Einstein, and that's another Einstein. There's no. There's one after that. Don't have it. No.
That's all I got. That's all I got.
Okay, so there was another one from Rav Cook. If you can find it, we can read it as well. Anyway, so here is the cool thing. Yeah, okay, we can find it later. Um, the 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 cool thing is this: when we begin to work on that connection between us, when we begin to identify that we're actually are pieces of one thing, that we are indeed all one, when we begin to practice this inner work, this spiritual development of our consciousness, when we begin to identify that you and me and all of humanity and all of nature are one thing, time and space will once again dissolve because they weren't there to begin with. That's the crazy thing. Okay,
This is something really.
Chris to our aid. There we go. He found something. Okay, yeah, that's the quote. Can you go back one like where it starts though? We got to read this. This is a good one. Can you go back to where it starts? I think it's one before that. I think that's in the middle
Okay.
of the
One second.
quote.
Give me another. Keep talking for like another 20 seconds, and I'll have
Seth,
it.
what you were saying?
Um, this is something that's when we always speak about love, connection, and unity. Um, it's so much more than it just feels great to be together. And we've talked so many times about the health benefits of connection. And when I smile, you smile, there's like that smiling game. And we talked about mirror neurons, and really all of that is still playing with the same building blocks in the sandbox, but now opening up this whole topic here. Somebody asked before, I really want to know what that membrane is. So we have from our skin inwards, we have five senses, that belong to me. In the correct connection between, for example, an eardrum, vibrations just don't enter into a hole in the head. There's a membrane there that blocks the sound, and some sound is rejected, and then other sounds go in. Same thing with the eyes. The light hits a membrane, some light is reflected out, and some light goes in. In learning a certain way to build a certain connection between other human beings, right? We've heard about the connection that mycelium have, that they can travel underground and give messages, and trees can communicate, and whales can send humans, the highest degree, the crown of all of that creation. When the humans connect in a certain way, that is where that certain membrane is built, that when the upper light that we talked about at the beginning with the TV, when you're trying to tune into that frequency,
Hmm.
together between the emotional relationships, using the mind to understand where that target is, and then between these emotion, this love and this hate and all these forces, working them between us, we build in the air, of course, we build that membrane, that upper light. Because remember, the light from the sun, for example, corporeal light, not spiritual light, it travels however many tens of millions of miles, right? But
Mm-hmm.
look at space, it's totally black.
Yeah.
You don't see anything shining. Once it hits something, then it illuminates. So all of space is filled with light, but all of space appears empty. In the same way, all of this space is filled with that upper light, and what we're doing is just creating that something for that light to hit, in the correct way, and how to know how much of it should come in and how much goes out, so that we can start to focus on reality.
Nice,
Mm.
nice. We got to wrap up here. Chris, do you want to put the quote up? Or do we have it? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there we go. This is the one. In spirituality, okay, it's a little more complicated than I felt it was, but so maybe we'll have to give more commentary on it next time. But it's nevertheless beautiful. No, no, put it up, Chris. Let's read it. The In spirituality, the potential does not lack the actual. The potential does not lack the actual, meaning everything is there, um, to make things easier. Only the thought of creation is needed in spirituality. It doesn't need to materialize for the spiritual. For the spiritual, you don't need um, any materialization. The thought that exists in spirituality, the thought of creation, which is to create a created being and raise it to the degree of connection, complete connection with the force that created it, that thought is enough. As the potential becomes actual through time, and time is irrelevant in the spiritual. Okay, so when the spiritual information about what needs to happen, about the what the governing force of creation wants for its created being, when that information, that thought of creation, materializes and becomes actual, it happens through time. But spiritually speaking, it's unnecessary, and there is no need for the actual there. The state of connection in potential there is already sufficient, and so you don't need time. One who directs his desire, in consequence, right? One who directs his desire towards the spiritual rises above time. And to the extent that he rises, the differences between the potential and the actual fade until there's no difference whatsoever. Okay, there's a lot to interpret here. This is from Rav Kook, but to make it a concluding sentence, as we begin to work on our connection, time and space, which are illusions as science identifies, illusions that result from our separation and shattering as Kabbalists identify. As we begin to reconnect and become one again, time and space will disappear as well. And we will begin to experience ourselves as a completely different kind of existence, not separated individual material beings, but rather a collective, non material entity that is one with the force that created it. Let's leave something for next show. I think we tried to. I gotta say, we tried to tackle something very big today. So I don't
Beyond
know.
time and space in just 1 hour on the Great
Yeah,
Transition
exactly.
Thursday.
I would say to all of our dear friends, viewers watching, and with us jamming here in this conversation above time and space. Maybe throw in your questions, your ideas, your suggestions for what you'd like us to focus on and to get into next time, um, so we can see what's left to
It
uncover.
looks like all our friends
Yeah.
on the Great Transition uh, channel are really enjoyed today. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Timothy and Julie and Slightly Slanted and David and P. Marlin and Shannon and Patricia and Deborah. Okay, thank you very much. So this was a good topic then. Um,
Yeah, we had
okay,
people connected from Toronto, Spain, Ohio, Florida, Vienna. You see, above time and space, Vienna, Arkansas, Ireland, Italy, Portugal, England, Pakistan, North Carolina, Vancouver, Miami, Norway, Texas. Beautiful. Let's go above time and space, Seth. Do you have a tune to help us do that?
sure,
All
Sure. Thanks,
right.
everybody. We'll see you next time.
See you next
Lots
time,
of love. Big
Thursday,
hug.
2 p.m. Eastern.
All
We'll be
right. Not
here.
here Sunday.
No, 2
Thursday, 2
p.m.
p.m. Eastern.
Thursday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern.
Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern. Bye, everybody.
To take our first breath, to take our first action, to be alive on what is left, to float above the light, all just to ask, to be in love with you and watch you from the outside. I wanna do what you do, just to run in a field that is blessed, and to come home with you and to rest, just to hunt in a field that is blessed, and to come home with you and to rest.
Masked up, gotta block the call. Masking up my heart from egoistic thoughts. Learning all the lessons that this pressure gave us. Wanna save myself, I gotta save my neighbors. Slowly recognizing egoistic nature. Showing us connection is the only sacred. We gon' come together, plow these fields of hatred. All is one with sowing seeds of love relations.
You shatter these walls, unsettle this heart from the chains of time. Then we soar through oceans in the sky, oh, through the cold, to be in love with you, watch you with a bird's eye, see the world is filled with you. Just to run in a field that is blessed, and to come home with you and to rest, just to hunt in a field that is blessed, and to come home with you and to rest.
Only love can save us. Viruses, the hatred, unity gon' vaccinate us. True immunity from all the things that separate us. Everything is only for the good, it's all to change us. Yeah, so with tears and we reaping joy. Ego is the evil seeking to destroy. Education covering the hate with love. Revelation blessings raining from above.
Just to hunt in a field that is blessed, and to come home with you and to rest, just to hunt.